I think there are 7 modules. So we will start from early Christian architecture, followed by Byzantine, and so on and so forth. So today, I'm hoping that we can finish early Christian architecture because early Christian architecture is quite small compared to other type of architecture, and hoping we could finish it today. And next meeting, September 2, first 30 minutes of our hour, we could review what are our discussions for today. And another 30 minutes, we could start the next topic, which is Byzantine architecture. And the last hour is for our first quiz. Okay, so that's September 2, no, not today. Okay, so to start, historical timeline lang of architecture. So in your history of architecture 1, I'm sure that you discussed prehistoric, mga Stonehenge, and so on and so forth. You have Egyptian architecture. You have the Mesopotamian or the Near East. So I think you're very familiar with all of this Egyptian and Near East architecture, plus the Greek architecture. So one of the beautiful architecture, type of architecture, the Greek, plus also the Roman. So after the Roman era, actually the Roman era or the Roman architecture is one of the longest architecture, the longest timeline. I think it from it spans up to 1,000 years, murag 10 centuries ang Roman architecture. Okay, so for early Christian architecture, it started while ongoing pa ang Roman. Bale, downfall of Roman architecture, medyo ni-rise ang early Christian architecture. Okay, so if you think or if you try to think about early Christian architecture, if you try to distinguish it, kinsa man gyud nagpa-start aning early Christian architecture. So from the term itself, Christian, so early Christian architecture started with our religion or the religion Christianity or Christianism. So the main person na I can say accountable or one of the well-known at that time is Constantine I. So also known as Constantine the Great. So was Roman emperor from 306 to 337. This is ano siya, AD. Dili ni siya BC, no? AD ni siya kaning 306 to 337. So again, no, one of the well-known emperor that brought the early Christian architecture is Constantine I, so also known as Constantine the Great. So nganong si Constantine man? The question is why Constantine? Because of all the emperors, Constantine is the first emperor that acknowledged Christianity or Christianism. The other emperors, ayaw nila sa Christianism. So if you know the history of how the early Christians, no, how they treated ang mga Roman, how they treated the mga early Christians, medyo harsh kayo, no? So may mga history about the kanang sa catacombs ngadto gipang buried ang mga Christian. So during the time wala pa si Constantine. So medyo they started the Christianity or the Christianism movement, but medyo patago. So during the time na nahimong emperor si Constantine, which is Christian siya, sa Christian na emperor, baptized. So ngadto na ni boom ang early Christian architecture. Okay, so from the term itself, early Christian architecture, one of the biggest or the greatest influence is the religion itself, the rise of Christianity. So the buildings that we can found in this type of architecture is mostly churches, specifically basilican churches. So what is the purpose of Christian churches? So again, we're very familiar with this, to shelter worshippers who met for prayers and praise to an unseen deity, And during the unsettled conditions at the beginning of Christianity, various places were adapted for this worship. So before ni Constantine, medyo the worship or the shelter for worshipers is not that well defined. Marabag if nagtukod kag bag-ong religion, and then dili pa ka well known, and against pagid mostly ang mga tao on that time, ang mga Roman, because Roman worship gods, di ba? Zeus, isa pa na nga, diha nga mga gods, mga Roman gods. So when there's a group of people that worship God, medyo lahi lang pagtanaw. So that is why medyo challenge ang early Christian architecture. So the terms or the buildings that we will discuss is at that time that early Christian architecture really started, na meron kanang nana sila'y area wherein they can develop their own shelters, they can develop their own buildings. Okay. So here, if you read this, it's all about Constantine or the Constantinople. Constantinople is a place, no? So later on we will check unsa gyud meaning anang or asa gyud dapit ang Constantinople. Okay. So another religious influence or social influence is si Constantine, si Emperor Constantine, since emperor siya sa Rome at that time, he said na the Roman area or the Rome is quite big to handle and quite dense to handle. So what he did is he transferred the capital. Actually, the term is not really transferred when you read the history books. The term is Constantine divided the Roman Empire into two. So there's that empire that transferred to Constantinople, or what we call the Byzantium. That is why early Christian and Byzantine architecture is quite connected to each other. Why? Because they have the same emperor nga nag-govern. So, which is si Constantine the First. So, when Constantine brought that Roman Empire, part of that Roman Empire in Byzantium, they changed the name of that place, katong Byzantium nga pangalan sa place. They changed that into Constantinople. And today, Constantinople is what we call the Istanbul in Turkey. Okay, so ngadto na nag-flourish ang parts of the early Christian and later on the Byzantine architecture. So that's the religious influence, and it's very evident that the religious influence is Christianity. And with the social influence, with the help of the Emperor Constantine, ni thrive ang early Christian architecture. Okay, so how about the geographical influence? So for the geographical influence, Christianity had its birth in Judea. So, sir, asa ba napit ng Judea? So, in present, that is Israel. So, I think we all know that ngadto nag-start ang Christianity or Christianism. So, eastern province of Rome, where it was carried by St. Peter, St. Paul, and other missionaries to Rome as the center of world empire. So, from the Judea, these missionaries, kani sila si St. Peter, St. Paul, ni-travel ni sila. Travel north, travel south, travel east to preach, to baptize other people na mo join na sa Christianism movement or the Christianity. So they also, at the same time, they bring the religion. At the same time, they also bring the influence of the early Christian architecture. So daghan ng mga tao nga ni join sa Christianism or Christianity. So this group of people, they need a place to worship. So that's the birth of the early Christian architecture. So in terms of geographical influence, medyo katag ang early Christian architecture. It's not the same with Greek architecture or Roman architecture that it's really more siya located in a place nga ngadto ra gyud. For the early Christian architecture, medyo there are places na ay early Christian architecture na type of building or structure nasa uban nga wala sad. So katag siya. But again, it started with Judea, the place Israel, and it goes south, north, east, and west. Next, geological influence. So in terms of geological influence, no, the quarry of the ruins of the Roman buildings influenced the architectural treatment of the style, both in regard to construction and decoration. So this influenced the style both as for columns and other architectural features, as well as fine sculptures and mosaics from other buildings were worked into basilican churches of the new religion. Okay, so during this time, as I've said before, Roman architecture is on the downfall. Medyo pa-down na ang Roman architecture or the Roman Empire. So there are buildings, mga dilapidated buildings, or kanang mga guba-guba na nga buildings. What they did is they use some of them, they use the same building, or some of them used the material, like for example, kanang mga rocks, or kanang mga big stones na gigamit sa old Roman buildings, ilang gipang kuha, and then they use that, parang recycle nila ba, they use that to create the buildings under early Christian architecture. So that's the geological influence. It's not the same with Roman architecture that they really invented the concrete to create their structure, katong ilahang mga circular structures, circular domes. In early Christian, most of their advancement in terms of building construction is clearly from Roman. Gigamit lang nila og unsay mga techniques during that Roman architecture. Next, climatic influence. So the climate of Italy, since Rome is the central part of Italy, the most important center of building activity in this epoch has been discussed in the Roman architecture. So Italy, in terms of climatic influence, since ang iyang center niya is the Rome, so na-discuss na siya under Roman architecture. So other areas like the climatic conditions of Roman provinces as Egypt, Syria, North Africa, where Christianity was established, were more or less varied. So it's not the same. If you notice ang Israel nga map, Rome is at the center. Somewhere north is I think Florence, and somewhere south na yung mga cities, other cities nga to. So since medyo dako ang area sa Italy, the climate is not that the climate of the north is not the same with the south areas. So that is why if you check with early Christian architecture examples, na yung mga buildings nga lahi siya features because it will adjust to the climate. So ang north, if you notice here, North Italy is temperate. No? Central Italy is genial and sunny. Southern Italy is tropical. So Southern Italy pareha sa to tropical ang area. Central Italy, which is the Rome area, genial and sunny. What do you mean by genial? Unsa din ang genial nga type of or climate? So if you check sa sa meaning niya, genial is warmth. It's not warm nga init. It's the opposite of cold. Like warmth in a way nga comfortable ka. Murag friendly warm. So that's the meaning of genial. So if you notice, I think ang pinaka best good location is the central part, which is the Rome area. So again, no, in terms of climatic influence, it is varied. Dili siya magkapareha. So north, temperate. Central part is genial and sunny. Southern part is tropical. So with this climatic influence, the features of those buildings under early Christian architecture is also varied because we always adapt kung unsa ato ang climate. Okay. So if we try to imagine those days, no, early Christian architecture, ano pala siya, mga 300 BC. They did that kind of architecture. Ang kada bang you designed a building that is appropriate on your climate. So inga na sadta dapat, di ba? Gi-apply na before during the early Christian architecture. So we have also to apply that right now at the present. We have to design based on our climate. If tig-ulan gud sa ato sig ulan, sig bagyo, so we have to design like if we have to design in a way na take into consideration ang ato ang climate. Dili kay mangita lang ninduta ni nga building pina daghang kayong glass nya flat roof, di ba? Nindot kayo nakita ka og examples in the internet, ninduta itsuya modern kayo, flat roof, naka-glass tanan nga exterior ano. But the question is it appropriate to the place or to the area where you situate your building, where you construct your building? So that's one of the questions, and that is what climatic influence is in terms of architecture. Next, what are the characteristics of early Christian architecture? So if you noticed, I think there are some of the examples provided on the given notes. No? So plain and simple exterior. So again, no? One of the basic characteristics of early Christian architecture, nakita ka plain and simple exterior, mostly, not all, but mostly, that is early Christian architecture. So with that plain and simple exterior, ilang gibawi na sa ilahang interior. So rich ang ilahang interior nga design, ilahang interior materials used is very rich. Later on, we'll have some examples. And the third one is gives a feeling of horizontality. So since most of the buildings, or I think duha ra man ni kabuk type of buildings for early Christian architecture, since ang ilang building is for worship, pataas gid siya, no, horizontal, and still gigamit gihapon right now sa ato ang mga type of architecture, which is churches. When you design churches, usually it's more of the horizontality. Though some of the churches right now provided kanang bitaw mga pataas, that's just for landmark purposes. Pero wala na gigamit, no, walay tawo nga nangatos taas na kanang mga spires or something. Mostly horizontal yun to accommodate a large group of people for worship. So that's the type of architecture during the early Christian architecture. So again, no, don't forget these three. When I ask you what are the general characteristics of early Christian architecture, so dali ra kay na siya, no? Plain and simple ang iyahang gawas. Ang iyang sud is rich, no? Richness in the interior. That means a lot of decorations, a lot of mosaics, upgraded material na gigamit sa ilang finishes. And lastly, ang iyahang size, so it gives a feeling of horizontality. Here, no? If you notice, if katong mga naka-review na sa notes nga akong gi-forward, again, no? These notes, some of these pictures, not all, are from Architect Mendoza. No? So if you have questions, just type in if you have questions, or if you want to like, sir, pwede i-repeat ni mo gamay, sir, kay what and nako na nakuha ang point. So you can type you can chat if ever na may mga questions. From time to time, I will check the chat nato sa atong meeting chat. Okay. So if you viewed this discussion Makita ni mong kaninga example, no? So, sir, yung ka, sir, simple. Yung ka, sir, simple ang plain and simple ang early Christian architecture. So, actually, these examples does not depict, no? Wala siya nag-mean nga kani siya early Christian architecture. So, I will correct this one and re-upload the file. So, what it says here, that the principal buildings for early Christian architecture are two. Duha lang gina siya. Dili siya pareha sa Roman architecture nga daghan kayo na mga Colosseum, na mga aqueducts, na mga basilica, and so on and so forth. I think there are so many buildings, type of buildings used in Roman architecture na medyo malimot na kita sa uban, but here in early Christian architecture, duha ra. So you have to remember two: basilican churches and the baptisteries, which is actually tapad na po sa church. So actually, literally, isa lang ni siya ka-development. But since massive man sad, the way they designed the baptisteries or asa nga to bunyagan, i-baptize, they've separated the type of building. So the church itself, the basilican church, and the baptisteries. So this example is the St. Peter's the St. Peter's Square, or the St. Peter's Church. But this one is not early Christian architecture. So this one is Renaissance, but later on we'll discuss that one. This one is Pisa, I think the Pisa Baptistery. Are familiar with the Leaning Tower of Pisa? Kanang daghang kayo magpa-picture na nag-push or something. This one is right. Wait lang. That's on the left side. Naano siya sa left side. So dili kay siya mapicturean kay syempre ang pinaka landmark is the Leaning Tower. So again, no, these examples these examples are not examples of early Christian architecture. No? These examples pertains to the type of building. So this one is a church and this one is the baptistery. So unsa magay porma na, sir, during early Christian architecture? So during early Christian architecture, the buildings are really quite simple. So here, actually, the St. Peter's Basilica or the St. Peter's Church, this one, no, kani siya, no, St. Peter's, bago naman the Renaissance, ano naman siya, Renaissance architecture. The old one is like this, now, made of timber, simple lang, no. Though nana ang plaza itself, but all of this kani sila tanan wala na ni thrive. Bali they reconstructed it, they demolished it, and they erect a new building. Wala gina siya yung nag-renovate lang and then gidungagan lang. Fully demolished ang old St. Peter's Basilica, and nagtukod sila katong bag-o, which is on the previous slide. So here, makita ninyo sa mga history books, the St. Peter's Basilica, it contains the basic parts of a church, which is later on we will discuss. So another type or structures under early Christian architecture is the baptisteries. So unsa magipormaan ng baptisteries during early Christian architecture? So it looks like this. Yan na siya, simple lang yun, no? It's not the same with the Pisa baptistery nga daghan kayong mga ornaments. So this one, simple, made of bricks, with a simple roof, and then with small windows. So again, the placement of the windows depends on the climate. So if you notice, we go back a little bit. Here, you can see a lot of windows, a lot of openings, a lot of open areas. So they design it in a way na pertains to the climatic influence or the climate of that area. So since this one is located in Rome, again, no, friendly warmth ang area. So pwede ka maka-provide og mga openings. This one here, this is located somewhere north na medyo init ang area. So that is why they provided minimal openings, this one. And here, I think wala ni openings. This is just for the light. Narimusod ang light. Pero if you notice, dili tanan open. They provided small circles here para makasod ang light. So another picture sa interior. Okay, so if you notice, diagonal siya ang iyahang dome. I mean octagonal, sorry. Octagonal domed. So this is what you call the Lateran baptistery. This is somewhere upper part of Rome, but upper portion. So almost temperate ang iyahang climate. So very simple on the exterior. But if you compare the interior part, there are a lot of ornaments. Makita niyo mga ornaments, a lot of paintings, a lot of murals. The way they provide these columns, very intricate. So rich ang ilahang interior. Okay. How about for the plans? So again, in early Christian architecture, we have two types of buildings, the basilican churches and the baptisteries. So again, unsa may iyang characteristics? Very simple on the exterior. For the interior, it's rich. How about for the plan? The plan is horizontal. Okay, so early Christians or early Christian architecture followed the basilican model. So, yan na siya, no? So, if you go back on your Roman architecture, basilica is a large public building with multiple functions, typically built alongside the town's forum. So, before early Christian architecture, muingon ka og basilica, it's not really church. Dili siya church. Basilica in Roman architecture is just a public building. Murag ug sa current pa na siya, multi-purpose building wherein people can go there, they could discuss, pwede decide na yung mga gathering nga doon nila buhatan sa ilahang mga basilica. But it's not really for worship purposes. So during early Christian architecture, they used the basilica plan. Ang plano sa basilica, they used it because they think that that type of plan really fits to their requirements. Of all the Roman architecture, si basilica ang pinaka-simple. The way siya buhaton is simple in terms of planning, in terms of construction. It's kind of simple compared to the other types of buildings during Roman architecture. So basilica in Roman is equal to stoa in Greek. Actually kani siya nga term, no, nigawas ni sa among board exam, these two terms, the basilica and the stoa. Murag ilang gi-compare, what is if basilica is to Roman architecture, unsa siya sa Greek architecture? So in Greek architecture, stoa siya. Covered walkway or portico, commonly for public use. So again, no, kani siya nga type of buildings, public use before the stoa and the basilica, but during early Christian architecture, ni convert na, no, nahimo na siyang place for worship. Okay, so how about for the walls? In terms of walls for early Christian architecture, they use rubble. So man ang rubble? Again, no, if you go back sa katong influence, one of the influence, they use the old stones, old mga quarries from Roman architecture or Roman buildings. So rubble are those irregular stones na kanang nasa ground, and then they collect it and then they form it into a building. So mura na sila ng recycle og mga materials from old or dilapidated na Roman buildings. And they also use concrete, since concrete was invented during Roman architecture. They also used concrete, but mostly rubble gid sila, or they mixed it. Rubble, and then to strengthen it, they use concrete. And for the interior part, they use plaster na sila gitawag og kanang if you notice ilang interior, rich, medyo detailed ang interior, they covered it with plaster. And mostly sa ilang exterior, especially for those areas na init, no, the north part of the Italy, which is temperate ang ilang climate, they use bricks because bricks is one of the insulators, one of the good insulators. So again, di manin ninyo, unsa may, like for example, unsa may pangutanon mo sa inyong design teacher or for example, mag-design lang mo, unsay finish anang imuhang building, gamit kog bricks, nga ni gamit maka bricks. Dahil lang sir, nindot lang tanaw ng bricks, di ba? So again, the main purpose why we will use bricks is actually to insulate. Bricks is one of the materials na good in terms of insulating heat. Lastly, we have mosaic decoration was added internally. So after the plastering here sa interior, they added mosaic. So again, early Christian in terms of walls, what do they use? They use rubble. Those are from the old Roman buildings. They use concrete, which is also invented during the Roman Empire. They faced the interior part with plaster. Nganong ilang mangi plaster so that they could add mosaic. Ilang butangan og kanang mga broken tiles ba, mga broken stones, wherein those mosaic can create figures, can create kanang faces of the saints. So muna ilahang reason nganong ilahang gi butangan og mga mosaic. And they also used brick or stone for their, like for example this one, no, like this one guba na lang gini siya, no. This is the present picture of the early Christian basilica. Naguba na lang gid siya, but if you notice, they use bricks sa iyahang structure. Okay, so manata sa walls. How about the openings? So for the openings, arcades, doors, and windows were either spanned by a semicircular arch, this one, mga arch, in which in nave arcades often rested on the capitals without any entablatures or were spanned by a lintel. Okay, so balik ko na to, no? Unsa may naa sa openings for this type of architecture sa early Christian architecture? So arcades, this one, no, kaning mga arcaded area. Doors, ang inyong main door or mga side doors. Windows were either spanned by a semicircular arc. So this one, ang door sad nimo nasa mga arc, mga windows sad nga rin. Like for example, this window gitawag na siya clerestory. So nasa siya mga arc. Often rested directly on the capitals without any entablatures. So rest dito sa capital or the kaninga column, no. So mo man iyang capital. So diretso wala siya katong, it's not the same with Roman architecture nga napay katong mga entablature, diba, napay mga metope and so on and so forth. This one is rest directly on the capitals or were spanned by a lintel. If you ask what is a lintel, partner na siya, no, kanang post and lintel. If mo ni imuhang poste, can you see my sketch? Hopefully makita niyo akong sketch. If mo na siya ang lintel, if mo na siya ang post kanang vertical, the horizontal one is the lintel. So post and lintel. So nigamit gyapon siya. Early Christian architecture uses this type of construction. Okay, so another look for the openings. So medyo open area na. So siguro this building is located at the central part of Rome. Okay, grabe man siya mga openings, no? Again, you can see the arches rested directly on the capitals. So I think this type of columns is Corinthian, either Corinthian or composite. No, if ato na i-zoom, maybe we can identify what type of column is this. So another picture for the openings, you can see here, windows, the arch windows, the arcade, the arch arcade, and the clerestory. So the arch clerestory. So again, the arch are directly rested on the capital itself. This one, muna yung capital. So, pumanata sa walls, sa plan, which is rectangular, and using the basilica. We also discussed about the openings. Next is roof. So, unsa may ihang roof? Roofs were made of timber. No, kahoy ilang gigamit sa class. No? And only simple forms of construction. That is why, if you search early Christian type of architecture, gamay ra kag makita nga ni last or gigamit pa na building. It's because the way they constructed their buildings, they used timber, which is dili gina siya nga naka durable type of material, especially if located ka sa climate na kanang magsig-uwan or wet climate. So again, no, if you search buildings about early Christian architecture, mostly all of those buildings, mostly, I think nasa mga 80% are dilapidated. Guba na. No? Kung ano mo, ruins na lang imong makita. It's because the way they constructed it, the roofs are made of timber. So, ngadto nag-start dahil, no? If na mo'y building tech 2, I think building tech 2 na siya, no? Kanang na yung mga padroingon mong truss. During this time, nigamit na sila og mga trusses. They have king post and the queen post. So narrower aisles were vaulted and the apse was usually domed and lined with beautiful glass mosaics. So ang ilang mga aisle gagmay and narrow, gamay lang width in terms of width gamay. So pataas siya, so that means narrow. So vaulted, the way they do it is vaulted. Later on we will have examples of that. The apse, later on we will discuss what is apse. Kung saan siyang apse. Was usually domed and lined with beautiful glass mosaics. So again, they really, like for example, in this next picture, this one, they really put time in decorating the interior rather than the exterior. Because again, their characteristics is simple ang ilahang exterior. Wala kay daghang mga ornaments. So what they do is they focus on the interior part. Okay. So this one, di mo makita ang ilahang roofing made of truss because na-siya'y ceiling. Na-siya'y ceiling part. But after the ceiling, that's the part nga natong roof na iyan forma. Okay. So far, any questions? Any questions? We're halfway there. So if you have questions, just let me know. Just type in. So I think kuha raman, no? In terms of characteristics, we have 3. Simple, ang iyahang exterior, rich ang iyang interior, and then ang iyahang plan is pataas, no? Horizontality or horizontal. So for the plan, they use the basilica. So ilang gigamit ang basilica sa Roman architecture and then ilang gi-convert into a worship na shelter. Okay, so for the walls, no, they use bricks for the materials. For the openings, daghan nilang mga openings and so on and so forth. For the roof, they use timber. Okay, so any questions so far? Wala pa. Sige. To continue, what are the types or method of construction? Sorry, kulang ni siya S. So, unsa man nga type of construction yung nagagamit for the roofing? So, we have truss, arcuated, columnar and trabeated. So again, no? Trussed, arcuated, columnar, and trabeated. So trussed, so kanang inga nagporma, no? Trussed man na siya. So we have the king post, we have the web members. Later on sa inyong building tech, you'll know how to do this, how to draw these types. So kanang truss, mo na siya yung nagkupot sa inyong roofing. So these are the kani siya, no? Mo na yung nagkupot sa inyong roofing, nangari ang roofing ano niya. So during early Christian architecture, they use this kind of construction. How about the arcuated? So from the term itself, arc, kani siya, no? Arcuated. Arc. Diba? So this one, arc or arch. Pwede na either of the two. So this one is what you call arcuated. How about this one? Columnar and trabeated. Actually, this is another term for post and lintel. So if you notice here, this one is the post. Mo ni ang poste, no? Or the column itself. Mo ni ang column. And then, gipatong ang beam. So that's what you call trabeated, or another term for that, which we discussed before, post and lintel. So poste and then lintel. So it's just the same with columnar and trabeated. So again, we have another three na sad, no? 3 systems of construction used during this type of architecture, during early Christian architecture. We use truss for the roof. Roofing na to, gamit tag truss systems. For the kanang nag-support sa ato ang roof, we have this arcuated, mga arches. And another supports that we have here, we have columnar and trabeated, or what you call post and lintel. So please don't forget these 3, no? Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Basic basic types of construction gigamit before, but now still gamit gyapon nato. Truss sa atong mga roofing, we use trusses, arches, not that popular these days, but the arch gigamit nato siya as form, but the way it works, the arch wala na kay nato na siya gigamit. Columnar and trabeated, still we always use this, the post and lintel. That's the basic systems of constructions that we always use still nowadays. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, let me know. Wala pa. Okay. Next slide. Evolution of church forms. So, as I've said before, early Christian architecture plans are horizontal only, no? Horizontality. One of the characteristics of the horizontality. So this one is the basic form of the church during the time. They followed the form of the basilica. But later on, syempre, no, it will evolve. So we need some, siguro during the time when they designed their buildings, nakarealize siguro ilang mga architect, siguro architect, we need something here sa ato ang altar to provide ornaments sa ato ang portion here sa atong altar. So it evolves like this. Nanay mga portions here, nanay mga ingani. And they tried to enlarge. Siguro ni daghan ang ilahang mga worshippers, no? Ni daghan ang, or ni dako ang Christianism or Christianity. So they try to enlarge it and still use this part here, which is later on we will discuss. Next, medyo ni dako na sad, and they provided a bigger size here kaning sa altar portion. And on the next one, they've included this. This one is the atrium, kind of mga open area. And this part here ilang gigamit ani niya. So murag this whole area here is this one. And then they added another area, atrium, here. It's like the same with, kind of familiar ka na to, no? Santo Niño Church or the Basilica of Senior Santo Niño. We have our church right here and na mga open space which is diyan na ta magmisa karon, di ba? So this is the plan before, but ilan nang gipa-evolve so that they can cater bigger or large crowds. And there are also areas na ano lang, they use the same form and they just adjust here on the ornament part. And same here. So on and so forth. So that's the evolution of church forms. So if you notice, from a simple one based on the Roman architecture building, they've adjusted it in terms of their requirements. So same ra sa mag-design karon. If you start your design or your plano in a simple box form, later on it will evolve. Like for example, na requirements na need ni siya mo adjust or need ni siya mo expand in the near future, like in the next 3 years mo expand ni siya nga building. So here, i-prepare na ko ni nga ma-expand. So your design, the way you plan it, will always go in accordance on your space requirements or the users or ang mga tao na mogamit. So before, again, ni-implement na siya nga yan ang type of evolution. And at the same time, right now, we always do those kind of evolution. Dili lang kay sa plano, but in terms of forms, nag-evolve na sa pang mga design forms. Okay? Any question? Wait lang, I think may question ko. Ay, wala pa. So for the next part, nanamata sa half na part sa ato ang discussion. We'll discuss about terminologies. So in this portion, all of these terminologies are from the Visual Dictionary of Architecture by Dicky Ching. So the one that I shared, kato nga file. So if you have time, siguro 1 week, 1 page, you can browse that book. It's really important. So again, no, during our time nga nag-review me, that's one of the book yun nga among gigamit. And one of our instructors said, katong instructor na mo sa JPT mo ko nag-review sa una. He said nga, if you read this book twice, cover to cover, which is what ako nahimo, more or less, or parang 90%, you can pass the exam. Because this is the book wherein the examiners or the gitawag na siya question bank nga rin gipangkuha ang mga terms, because this is one of the dictionary, a very credible dictionary for architects, used for architecture. So if you have time, kindly browse through. So all of these terms are also located, or you can find it in that book. Okay, so before we proceed, we'll have a 5-minute break. Ano lang sa water break or bathroom break. Okay, so if you have questions during the break, just type it and we'll answer that one if I know the answer. Okay, so we'll be back at 6:45. Hello? Madugro pa nyo balik, guys.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Madungog ra sir.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
So far, najira, nasabtendra ang discussion.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, thank you. So, naay nag-ask regarding sa book. Yes, wow, very good. No, you have the hard copy of that book. The one that I've shared to you guys is the first edition, and I don't know what's the major changes on the second edition. I think naray mga few added terms siguro. What I have is the first edition e-file and hard copy. So it's good that you have this book already. It's good. It's good. Nag-ask regarding attendance. From time to time, I will download maklik ra mo ko nga rin, no? Attendance list. So, makita na ko ang time nga ni sod mo sa class or sa meeting. Okay. Okay, take time man sa ka nang mag-roll call ko pa da isa-isa sa inyo. Okay, so we will continue. So these are the terminologies that we used in this early Christian architecture, because this is the first, murag siya mo'y pinakauna nga type of architecture that introduces church. Before, all of the structures are for mostly civic buildings, no? Market, kanang mga aqueducts, diba? The Colosseum, no? Used for entertainment, diba? But in this type of architecture, the early Christian architecture, this is the part wherein churches really placed or really have a big impact in terms of designing a municipality, a city. Nana sa center, mostly ang church. So there are a lot of dagang parts ang church. No? There are a lot of parts that you need to, for me, no, I could say you need to memorize or you need to familiarize the terms. No? Because these terms usually magawa sa board exam. Not all, but siguro depende lang. I think there are 2 or 3 terms and you don't know unsa nga term mo gawas. But what you can do is before, during sa among time, during sa kanang nag-review nako, what we did is among gi-sketch. We sketch the structure and then among gi-identify og asa nga ang kaning part and so on and so forth. Okay, so siguro you could do that when you study para ma-visualize ninyo on what is that part, where is that part. Okay, so to start, no? Nave. So nave is the principal or central part of a church, extending from the narthex to the choir or chancel and usually flanked by aisles. So what's that form? No? So here, here's my laser pointer. This one is the nave. No? So, nave day tawagan na, sir. Aisle mo guna sa mga walk down the aisle, baka nakaslan ba walk down the aisle man ang term. Actually, nave dapat na ang term. But still, center aisle is pwede na siya gamiton ng center aisle, but the correct term is really nave. So asa ang aisle? The aisle is at the edge. So center ang nave, right side and left side niya that's the aisle. So nas kilid ang aisle. The center is the nave. So again, no, what's the term? Nave. The meaning of the term, the principal or central part of a church extending from the narthex to the choir. The choir is here, or chancel, and usually linked by aisles. So nave, aisles, padong ka diri sa may chancel. Okay, so again, no, you're very familiar with this one. No? Inigsunin mo sa church, muna siya ang kanang murag hallway padong nga sa altar. So that's what you call nave. And those gagmay nga agianan, those small walkways on your left side and your the right side, that's what you call aisle. So next, aisle. So kubaw na ta, no? Any of the longitudinal divisions of a church separated from the nave by a row of columns or piers. So nganong naaman ni siya kaning mga dot-dot nga rin niya. So these are columns. No, kanina mga columns. And after the columns, naangad to ang aisle. And here, you can see this bigger, kaning dagko kayo. So, dagko kayong mga itom nga rin. These are the piers or pier. So, column ning mga dot-dot lang. Column. This column supports the roofing. This pier here still supports these columns, kay i-connect man na sila. And at the same time, supports the wall because during this early Christian architecture or siguro during Roman architecture, makita ka baga silang wall. Ito karon kay nipis na, di ba? Hollow blocks nipis na kayo. During that time, they used stones, siguro 1 meter width, no? Nga nakadagko ilang stones na gamit. And they also used bigger supports. Nga naman, tungod sa material nga ilang gigamit. Siguro when they use concrete at that time, they don't have reinforcements, kanang kabilya ba? Or the rebars. So they have to make their walls bigger and their support is also bigger. So aisle, nave, aisle, and we have here columns. And this one here are the piers. So again, to give you some illustration, here the piers katong mga dagko kayo nga nag-support gyud sa main structure sa imong church. The columns here are the murag mga sub support sa imong kaning wall at the interior part. So piers and columns. Basta pier dako nga column. Column is this one. Next term, narthex. Narthex is the portico or kanang gitawag na siya porch bitaw. Di ba when you designed residential buildings na kay before ka musod sa imong main structure, napakay gamay nga area. Porch. It's just the same with this one, portico. The portico before the nave of an early Christian or Byzantine church. So this term, dili lang siya kay gigamit sa early Christian architecture. This is also used in other types of architecture. Byzantine, and later on in Gothic, nagyapon na siya nga term. So there are two types of, this one, no? Sorry. Napon ako. So, entry part, door. Nig-open mo sa door, dili ka makita lingkuranan dayon. No? I think if you imagine going sa church, nigsud nimo sa door, nig-open gud sa door, napa na siya gamay nga space, that's what you call narthex. Marabag welcome area, and sometimes you can see there nangaraang nailingin diya sto nga, di ba? Diya ka manguros, no? May holy water nga ra manguros ka. So that's the narthex part. That portion. This portion here is the narthex. Before you enter the nave or before you sit on the kaning mga pews or kanang mga lingkuranan or what we call pews, murag i-welcome sa kadiri sa narthex. Or kanang portion no, punuwa sa church or punuwa sa Santo Niño or punuwa sa Santo Rosario. Nga rin lang sa kung magtambay diri sa kuan. Narthex na siya. So here, a isometric view. This one here is the nave. This one here is the narthex. So, okay na, no? Kuha na to. The nave at the center. Aisles here on the sides. Narthex here. on the entrance part. So, asa man ang narthex, sir? Questioning. Sir, asa ang narthex? Nasa sud or nasa gawas? Either. It could be either. Pwede sa sud, pwede sa gawas. That is why we have these two kinds of narthex. We have the esonarthex and we have the exonarthex. So, asa man ang suludanan niya. So, the esonarthex is the inner. Exonarthex is the outer. So, here, say for example, here. Basic plan, no? Ano lang siya, no? Sketch lang. If this is the door, here, mo ni ang pultahan, nigsud nimo sa church. Mo ni ang nave, na diri ang mga lingkuranan. Nangari ang mga lingkuranan. And then another aisle. In bigger churches, they have multiple aisles, like the na aisle sa pinakakilid, na sa aisle sa tunga. But the one at the center is the one and only nave. The other hallways or walkways are aisles. So here, before ka moabot sa nave, may uban double doors. Murag kaduha bita kamsud. It's just the same like I think kana musod kag mall or SM City. Diba? Yung sud mo pultahan kay napagila yung pultahan sa sud, diba? So here, narthex, kani siya, narthex, the well-defined narthex, which is that's the inner narthex, and diri sa outer part, kani siya, it is also called narthex. Kani siya niya diri. Narthex gyapon na siya, which is what you call outer. Usually, you could see exonarthex or the outer narthex if there's an atrium. If na ganing atrium, like kanang big open space, you can see an exonarthex or the outer narthex. But if wala gani, like nigsudi mo door dayon, nave dayon ni siya niya, wala ra kay exonarthex. Only the inner narthex or the esonarthex. Okay, so again, atong nailhan nga mga terms, we have the nave, the aisle. Some churches have double aisles, duha. And we have the narthex. There are two kinds of narthex, iso and the exo. Iso is inner, exo is outer. Okay, so ayan nagkalimting ang mga terms. Another term, sanctuary. So this one is the center. It's not really the center as literally center, but this is the most important part of a church. The sacred or the holy place, as that part of a church in which the principal altar is placed. Okay, so here is an example. This one is an example, a very good example of in early Christian architecture. There's a simple altar here. The sanctuary is here. Sorry. Mali. How to undo this one? Eraser. The sanctuary is this one. Asa gibutang imong altar. So again, no? This is your altar, your table. That place here, asa gibutang ang altar is the sanctuary. In modern design, karong mga sa karon nga part, so ingani na siya forma. In modern church designs. So mo na ang sanctuary. Kani nga portion. Okay. So again, no? Dali ra ka na ma-remember, sanctuary, nagatong altar. O asa located ang imong altar, the principal altar, that's what you call the sanctuary. Next. Apse. Sa man ang apse? A semicircular or polygonal projection of a building, usually vaulted and used especially at the sanctuary or east end of a church. Another term niya is apsis. So, going back sa atong example, This one is the sanctuary, di ba? This one is the sanctuary, kaning color blue. After that sanctuary, na siya gitawag og apse. So here, kani siya nga portion here, this one is the apse. And usually, it is a semicircular. If you notice sa mga plano, if you go back few slides, the typical basilican church plan is rectangular. No? Rectangular ni siya. And on that part, ug asa ang altar, naka-situate na siya sa east. Bali, imong altar is facing, situating east. So this one is west here. And this one here, need kag apse. So that's why they provided semicircular. Nauban sad polygonal, no? Hexagonal. I think the common one is the hexagonal or octagonal. But mostly, ingani siya forma ng pa-curvilinear. So that's the apse. A semicircular or polygonal projection of a building, usually vaulted, no, arc, and used at the sanctuary or east end of a church. So again, no, ang mga designs sa church, the main entrance door, it's at the west, nada ang door, east ang church, and when nag-evolve na ang design sa church, it forms into a cross na. Ayan na ang design sa church, yung the evolve. So from the, again, no, there's the evolution of plan from a rectangular, nidungag sila og semicircular here for the apse. Unsa may naa sa apse, sir? Nagadto ang mga relics. Before, during the early Christian, I think they're not allowed to have statues. Dili pa sila allowed or dili pa sikat ang magbuhat og mga statues during that time. So what they do is they painted here. And the term for that paint is fresco. I'll write it here. I don't know if masuot ba na ko ni. I'm just using mouse. Fresco. Ayan ang spelling na, fresco. So fresco is, di ba, they use plaster man, di ba, in their interior. So when they plaster the walls, plasteran nila. While that plaster is still wet, basa pa ba? They provided ink. So ngadto sila nagpaint. So that's what you call fresco. So you paint, so may term na, you paint while the plaster is wet, di ba? That's what you call fresco. Okay, so mostly sa apse, that's the part wherein they decorate, they portray the saints, no? Ilang ipangbutang diha ang mga kani. I think this is the Sagrada Familia. So they painted it, and the way they paint it is fresco. That's the way of painting. Ay, sorry na pa din. Here, another example of an apse. This one, closed ang yang apse. This one, iyan ang gibutang adog mga semicircular windows. But still, ang iyang form is semicircular siya. Okay, so again, nakuha na nato ang mga terms, no? Nave, narthex, aisle, sanctuary, apse. The next one is, okay, sorry, another example pa dahil sa apse, no? Excited si sir. So again, no, sa iyang form, this one here is the apse. Your altar or the sanctuary area, your altar table here, this is the sanctuary. So likod sa sanctuary, nangat to ang apse. This one. So sir, unsa na mga W, S, N, E? So west, east, north, and south. Some of our churches, if you notice, no, tanawon niyo sa Google Map, some or most of our churches are also oriented like this. No, ang iyahang altar is along east or nadri sa east. Door is at the west. north and south. So try to check sa mga churches na to sa Cebu or within the Philippines. Siguro dili kayo literally along east kay it will also matter on the site, no, gasa ka located. Okay, what if mora na gihatag the time, no? So dapat imong i-adjust gamay, but the orientation is more or less along east west ang iyang entry and the altar. So again, another term for the apse is apsis. Don't forget this term. Okay, so another term is the bema. So kani siya nga term class, medyo mo ni among usa sa mga giawayan namo during the review, because bema in internet, in Wikipedia, di ba? Sa mga sources nato, the meaning of bema is a raised stage or elevated platform for the clergy. But in Visual Dictionary of Architecture, makita nimo nga to, search nimo bema nga to, a transverse open space separating the nave and the apse of an early Christian church, developing into the transept of later cruciform churches. So, taasa sa lanas nga meanings, right? So again, if we read it again, bema, a transverse open space separating the nave. So again, kailan taon sa ang nave, mo na siya ang main nato nga agianan, or another term niya is main aisle, but the correct term good is nave. So ang apse is katong nasa sa east part of an early Christian church, developing into the transept of later cruciform churches. Okay, so example ta, no, unsa ang bema. So this one here, mo na siya ang sanctuary portion. Kay mao man siya ang part ug asang altar. The bema is this part, no? It's not really semi-circular in form, but this is the bema, the rear or after sa ato ang sanctuary kaninga portion. Sorry. Kaninga portion, this is the bema. So where is now the this is the apse. I'm sorry. This is the apse. So asa naman ang bema? Bema is here. Mo na siya ang bema. Bema. It's not clearly di kaya mo siya ma-identify in this picture, but in our other examples and our next slides, makita nimo asa ang bema. So it says here, developing into the transept of later cruciform churches. So unsa ang transept? So here, this one here is the transept. Kani siya ang transept. So before na siya na create ang cruciform church, like before they add this wing here, the wing on the north and the south, this part here is what you call bema. So since ni extrude na siya, no, they protrude a certain part here on the north and south, that's what you call transept na. The prolong ang amo ang term sa una para di mi maglibog sa bema and transept is the prolonged bema, more bag extended bema. So bema is just when you have a rectangular plan sa imong church, that part here, kaninga part, is the bema, but when you have a cruciform type of plan for your church, it will now be called transept. Okay, so hopefully na differentiate ninyo unsay difference sa transept ug sa bema. Ay, sorry. So again, no? Bema. Sanctuary o asang altar. This one here, so may tawagan niya, apse. Diba? So if cruciform ni siya nga forma, sir, mura naman nag-cross. Actually, di pa na siya cross, no? Because you have to extend this part here. We have to extend this part here like that. This part right here, okay. This part right here will now be called transept. Okay, ni-extend naman ng imuhang sanctuary. So churches with transept have bigger sanctuary. Marag bigger ang iyang area wherein they place the altar. Okay. Another example here, transepts. No? Kanigid, cruciform gini siya nga forma. So transept na siya tawag. But if dili na siya cruciform, bema na siya tawag. Okay, so again, no, apse, we have the nave, the aisle here, narthex here, exonarthex, and the asonarthex. Another term is ambo. So this term, same lang siya, no? Ambo, it could also be called ambon. It could also be called pulpit. It could also be called lectern. So all of these four are just the same. So unsa na siya tawag? So I think if you've tried to kanang kamoy ni basa sa gospel, ngadto mo nagbasa sa gospel sa ambo or what you call pulpit or what you call lectern. So a stand raised on 2 or more steps for the reading of the gospel. So gigamit na before during early Christian architecture and until now still diya gyapon ta mobasa sa ato ang gospel. So again, ang term na niya is ambo, ambon, pulpit, or lectern. It's just the same. And usually made of wood. Usually made of wood. Those so uban nga ng mga modern, they use metal, na mga stone, but usually made of wood na siya. Another term very familiar is choir. So the part of a church where divine service is sung. So again, no, very familiar, choir. So sir, asa located ang choir? Choir is located somewhere in the transept. Ngadto na siya skilled. Diba? Sa kanang cruciform. If your plan is cruciform, sorry, I'm using mouse in drawing this one. Your choir is here. Kanidiri. Portion of that transept. Nangadto ang choir. And this one, kanindiri sa semicircular, apse na siya. And the bema, if dili ni siya, again, dili siya cruciform, bema is this one. Next, another term. It's either called cancelli, chancello, or chancelli. So it's a low screen in an early Christian basilica, separating the clergy and sometimes the choir from the congregation. So I think you're very familiar with this now. Na ang mga churches, mga old churches, have this kind of low screen. May uban nga ngara maluhod niya, ngara mag ano, di ba? Maluhod ka diri nga part. Diya ka mga lawat, mga terms, mga lawat. So a low screen in an early Christian basilica, separating the clergy and sometimes the choir from the congregation. Another term is iconostasis. So iconostasis is a screen or partition on which icons are placed. So separating the sanctuary from the nave of an Eastern church. So again, no, let's read the definition. Iconostasis, or the screen or partition in which icons are placed. So from the term itself, iconostasis, nangadto ang mga icons, or what we called during this time, they have they have statues, nanangadto ang mga kanang mga figures. Before, what they did is paintings, murals, frescoes. During this type nga magbutang na kag iconostasis, that's the time nga nanakay mga statue, no, mga rebulto. So, unsay forma na niya? This one, no? It could also be partly fresco. Pwede sa gyud og statue na may butang. So, this is the iconostasis. So another view of the iconostasis, that one. So a screen or partition in which icons are placed, separating the sanctuary from the nave of an Eastern church. Okay. So sir, giun sa pag-separate. The question is, sir, giun sa pag-separate. So if I would sketch here again, wait lang. I'll use blue para makita. Can you guys see my sketches? I don't know if visible siya.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. That's good. No?
Makita kasi.
And hopefully, although we have recordings, but hopefully, nag-sketch sad mo. Okay, so if this is the typical plan of the church, again, ay apps nga rin. This one is the sanctuary. Nangari ang imuhang altar right in front. This iconostasis, nasa i-provide diha nga murag wall, but it's not up to ceiling. This wall is well designed, well ornamented. Daghan kayong mga, like for example here in the example, daghan kayong mga ornaments, no, in very intricate ornaments. And behind that one, there are also other still part of the sanctuary, but naangaran nila gipang keep, like for example kanina mga gold na mga cups and so on and so forth. Naangaran nila gipang place. So again, the term here, separating the sanctuary from the nave of an Eastern church. So ang nave here is the central part of the church. So the sanctuary separates, this one separates, the iconostasis, I mean, separates the sanctuary, the rear portion of that sanctuary to the nave. So ang imong makita, instead of the apse, ang imong makita na naman is the iconostasis. So they did this kind of wall here during the time that they have relics na nasa yung mga statues. Actually, very ano ni siya, very familiar ni siya sa tuwa in our churches. Mostly na yung mga yan iconostasis. So I think right now, if mo sud mong church, ang inyong mga terms lahi na, no? Hala, nave ba yun? Tas nave, tas nave agi ba? Ayo, des aisle. Diba? And then, wait sa tadris narthex. Asa man ta makita ba? There's narthex lapit sa may kuan. So, ana na itong mga terms gamiton. So that, later on, during sa inyong board exam, ibo makalimot sa term. Because if you don't use those terms, siguro malimtan ninyo. Or need pa ninyo i-review balik para, mo dito narthex. So, from time to time, use terms like narthex, apps, ambo. Diba? Okay, so again, another example for iconostasis. Font. So, dili na siya font nga kanang sa to ang text nga font. Font is this one. A basin usually of stone which holds the water for baptism. No. Nauban, makita ko sa una, nagdula sa Beyblade nga rin. But actually, nadi ang holy water na again, diha ka i-baptize. So, mo nang gitabunan na nila. No? So, some of them have covered para dili makontaminate ang water. Kay mahugmang guna nga stagnant if ever dili nila malimpyuhan. So, what they do is they provided covers sa fonts. Some of them have bigger, naiuban dako kayo nga fonts. Pwede i-ana ang ulo sa bata. Some of them pwede gamay lang para cup lang ang gamit. So it differs from time to time ang design, but it started during the early Christian architecture. Another term, sepulcher. So a tomb or receptacle for relics, especially in a Christian altar. So a tomb or receptacle for relics, especially in a Christian altar. So ngadto nila na ibutang adto ang mga relics. So the term is, again, the term is sepulcher. Another term, very familiar, no? Atrium. So, very familiar. The main inner hall of a Roman house. So, Roman house na yung mga atrium. Still, gigamit na siya for bigger basilican churches. So, before ka mo sulod sa main church, napa na siya atrium. Actually, it's just the same design with, again, ang atong example gid nga makuha sa basilica is the Senior Santo Niño na basilica, no? Senior Santo Niño Church. Katong magmisa nga open air, that's the atrium actually. Open air nga misa, na mga bleachers nga rin. So that open area is what we called atrium during the early Christian architecture. And up to now, still gitawag pa na siya atrium. Another term, we have colonnade. So colonnade is actually a place wherein makita kag daghan kayong columns. So if nagay kay place nga makita kag daghan kayong columns, colonnaded area na siya. You're surrounded by a lot of columns. So another term, very familiar, mosaic. So again, early Christian architecture, they're very intricate in their interior, rich in interiors sila. So they use mosaic, so a form of surface decoration formed by inlaying small pieces of tesserae of glass, kana mga mga na brittle or mga buwak-buwak na glass, stone, marble, or enamel inlaid into a cement, mortar, or plaster matrix. So again, no, nganong nasa lay plaster ang early Christian architecture because they use well or daghan kayong mga ornamentation such as mosaic, frescoes, paintings, murals sa ilang interior. Dili lang kay makita nimo ang bricks sa ilang interior. They covered it with plaster and napagid sila yung mga art. So if you notice here, makita na nimo ang art during early Christian architecture sa ilang interior, dili sa exterior. So their exterior is very simple, but ilang gibawi sa ilang interior. So I think kita na nato ni before. So na-discuss na nato ang apse, bema, we all know, nave, aisle, narthex, we all know narthex, atrium. How about this one? Ambulatory. So this one, for bigger basilica, so kana imong agianan padung ka mo adto sa narthex, that's what you call ambulatory, this part here. Colonnaded area na siya, no? In St. Peter's Basilica, this part here is circular. Circle na siya. But in typical Basilican church, square, rectangular type man ta, horizontal, ato magyong gi panindigan ang term nga horizontality during early Christian architecture. So horizontal lang kita. Squarish or rectangular ang yang type. So this walkway here, colonnaded walkway here, going to the entrance part, the narthex, that's what you call ambulatory. So here, another part or another illustration of the parts of a church. So before the atrium, katong mga main entry part or the entrance gud sa building, aside from the main door, the main door is the number, this part here, doon sa narthex. This number 1 is what we call propylaeum. So the entrance building of a sacred prison, whether church or imperial palace. So pwede siya gamiton ang term sa church, pwede sa palace. Number 2, we have the atrium, again sa ang open area. So another term niya is forecourt of a church. So this one here is the ambulatory, padung sa narthex. So number 3 is narthex, the entrance hall or porch proceeding to the nave of a church. So where's the nave? So nave is number 4. Next, nave. Okay, so we're very familiar. Nave, the great central space in a church. So aside sa hallway, nasad nga ra ang katong iyang mga pews. Term na, pews. Ang mga lingkuranan ba? Side aisle or the aisle. So some of them, kanang mga bigger churches, we have 2 aisles. So kaning mga number 5, these are aisles. Number 6 is the crossing or what we call bema. Number 7 if cruciform ni siya nga building, though kani siya nga part gitawag na niyang transept. So in cruciform church, the whole arm set at right angles to the nave, so muna siya gitawag og transept. And number 8, kaning semicircular or pwede po siya kanang polygonal, pwede siya octagon, pwede siya hexagon, this is what you call apse. So going back na, ato ni memorize. Propylaeum, tuyo kadere, ambulatory. The center part is the atrium. And we have here the narthex. And the central portion is the nave. So kilid niya is mga aisles or side aisles. And here, before ka maabot sa sanctuary, there's what you call bema, or in circular nga mga, or I mean, cruciform church, that's what you call transept. And then here, nangari ang choir, here sa mga 7. And then if we extend this part, this number 8 part, makita nimo dia ang iconostasis, which is nangara pod ang sanctuary, which is nangara ang altar. And number 8 is the apse. Okay, so hopefully ma-visualize rin nyo, no? Or ma-differentiate rin nyo ang mga parts. So propylaeum, ambulatory, atrium, narthex, nave, aisle, bema or transept. We have the choir, we have the sanctuary, and we have the, what else? We have the iconostasis, which is a wall here in the sanctuary. Number 8 is the apse. How about the font? Asa ang font? Font is somewhere here. It's either the entry or pwede sa diri dapitan na nga ang font for the baptism. How about the ambo? Asa ang ambo? Ambo could be placed tapad sa imuhang altar table. So na nga ang ambo. Okay. Another term, we have here nave elevation, and we have number 10, clerestory. So nave elevation, term which refers to the division of the nave wall into various levels. So in the early Christian basilica, the nave elevation usually is composed of a nave colonnade or arcade and clerestory. So mo na siya, no, kaning nave elevation. So asa ang clerestory? Ano, sir? Kaning mga windows on top. So the main purpose gid sa clerestory is to provide kanang sunlight, to provide light within the interior of your church. Okay, so we'll stop here kaning portion, and then siguro next meeting, the first 30 minutes, a little review, and we can discuss the examples. Siguro hindi na to kaya ang intro sa Byzantine architecture next meeting, because after here there are examples lang naman, no? So our quiz next meeting from 6:30 to 7:30 is up to here lang, up to here sa parts. So from the portion na na-discuss na ta og influences of early Christian architecture up to the parts of the early Christian architecture church. So that's the span of our quiz for next meeting. I thought mahuman na to ang 62 slides, pero kulang din, no? So hopefully we can discuss before na sa ato ang quiz ang mga examples for early Christian architecture churches. Okay, so I will share this, although I've shared the file katong gikan kay Architect Mendoza, but this adjusted one, I will also share this para namoy updated nga reference. Okay? So, questions?
Aray
Ay,
sa
wait.
ako.
Kung ang choir, sir, naka-place sa transept, what if dili crucifix form ang transfer? Asa nakabutang ang choir? Bema. Kabutang siya sa Bema. Other questions? Multiple choice of identification and essay. Identification and essay. You can have our multiple choice during the midterm exam. But for our quizzes, it's identification and essay.
Sir,
What
na ko'y
else?
question, sir.
Sige.
Unsaon pag sir, distinguish if cross form siya, sir, like ni kuan siya, like ni extend siya gamay nga space sa kuan sa bema, like ni outdoor, like nano siya laing space, dili na jud siya horizontal tan-aon.
Yes. Extended ang iyahang sanctuary part. Extended. If we go back a little bit on our slides. Wait. No. This one, makita na ninyo? This one is wala. This one is the best example sa cruciform. Kani siya niya. Pero if kaning part, kaning chancel or the sanctuary, if this apps here, if this apps here, if nidikit ni siya somewhere here, it's not cruciform. It's just a rectangular or horizontal type of plan for the early Christian architecture church. But if elongated na ganyan nga portion, the sanctuary or the chancel part, that's what you call na cruciform na siya nga form. Okay, another question. I can siguro pwede pa at least duha. Any questions? Or if wala mo yung mahununan karon, like later on, sir, manggawa sa tanan. No, dili siya tanan, no? Partly. So again, no, sa board exam, I don't know if na-share na ako ni, but during sa board exam na mo, first subject, 40 to 50% of it, 40% is history of architecture. But early Christian architecture is nara sa mga, I think, 2 to 3 points. Pero kanang 2 to 3 points will matter a lot sa imong grade. Kanang 1 point, 2 points. What if gipangutana ang iconostasis niya? Kalimot ko sa iconostasis. Pero naka-remember ko. That point, kanang 1 point for that iconostasis will matter a lot sa imong score. So again, one way na di ninyo siya malimtan ang mga terms is to use it. Sir, mura mig kuan paminawon. Sir, mura mag-line kay paminawon na lahi ang mga terms while mo to make church. Sige lang, no? Sige lang. Magandaan na mo na. Ingana inyong ma-feel later on when you kanang mo take na mo sa board exam, tanan ninyong kanang mo lakaw mo sa sidewalk, lakaw mo sa road, murag inyong mata kay murag permi nag-identify og kuan na ginabay kanang material kuan na ginabay. So ingana. So at least siguro at your level, pwede na mo mag-start na siguro. Okay. Always na sa east ang altar, sir. Yes, if kaya sa lot. If kaya sa imuhang property bitaw wherein you wherein you sa tawag ani ah kanang ngadto nimo itukod ay imong church. Ang altar is always at the east. Nga naman, ang iyang magong ang mostly ang altar naa siya clerestory on the apse. Pitangan nila clerestory. And usually ang misa, ang mass is held morning or early morning, and that sunlight from the east mo na siya nag-provide of dramatic effect. Wow, miracle. Actually, dramatic effect yun, literally. Nakuha ninyo ang view. So, if mo ni imong altar, likod ana niya is kanang east part. So, morning sun ni hayag or ni saka ang adlaw, nakay clerestory windows on that apse. So, that dramatic effects sa imong sunlight will really help sa imong interior design or interior lighting of your church. So what if di kaya? Pwede nimo i-east gamay, no? I-ana gamay sa east. Okay, so if you have other questions, just type here. If I can open my Teams tomorrow or early morning or tomorrow evening, I would answer all your questions. So if you have something that you need to clarify, just let me know. You could chat to all para if imong question mabalan sa uban na mag-uban nga mo chat nga ng direct nga chat. So what I will do is ang imong question is akong i-share sa uban. So might as well ask together with the group. Okay, so thank you guys and have a good night. See you next meeting na pag-andam-andam mo gamay sa quiz. Sayo na kayo actually. So naaratanan sa atong discussion. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Amping.